Welcome to Love Lies Chronicles. The night was already heavy with unspoken tension before the first insult left her lips. It had started the way these things always did, small, sharp comments, little digs masked as jokes. We were at a house gathering, the kind that used to feel comfortable, back when I thought my marriage was something real, something worth being proud of. But somewhere along the way, I had become a spectator in my own life, and tonight, I was seeing it all unfold as if I were standing outside of myself. My wife was in rare form, laughter spilling from her lips too easily, leaning into the attention of people who never seemed to respect me anyway. Her lover, yes, I had known about him for a while now, stood just a little too close, his smirk a permanent fixture whenever she spoke. I had tolerated a lot, more than any man should, but I wasn't stupid. I saw the way she looked at him when she thought I wasn't watching. I noticed how her voice softened when she addressed him, how her entire demeanor shifted into something more playful, more alive, in a way it never did when she was around me anymore. I had let it slide for too long, and she must have mistaken my silence for weakness, because tonight she didn't bother hiding it. Tonight she wanted an audience. A few drinks in, the conversation had turned reckless, teetering on the edge of something dangerous. They spoke about relationships, about the idea of owning someone. My wife scoffed, swirling the wine in her glass, before casting a glance my way. I just think some men are so entitled, she mused, voice lazy with liquor. Like, they think marriage means a woman owes them something. It's pathetic, really. The room chuckled, her friends nodding along in agreement. I should have ignored it. I should have let it slide. But something inside me tightened. A thread pulled just a little too hard. I set my drink down carefully. Is that what you think marriage is? A transaction? Her lover, Daniel, made a sound. Something between a laugh and a scoff. Come on, man. Don't take it so seriously. But I wasn't talking to him. I kept my eyes on my wife, waiting for her response. She smiled, slow and deliberate, leaning forward on the couch. I think some men like to believe they deserve more than they give. The implication landed hard. The group fell silent, sensing the shift in the air. And then she did it, with all the arrogance of a woman who believed there would be no consequences. She slapped me, right there in front of everyone. The crack of her palm against my face was sharp, slicing through the murmur of conversation like a knife. It wasn't a playful slap. It wasn't teasing or affectionate. It was meant to humiliate, to prove something. The room went still. I barely moved. For a moment, I could only hear the rush of blood in my ears, the slow, cold realization sinking into my bones. I wasn't shocked. Not really. Somewhere, deep down, I had been waiting for this moment. She sat back, her expression unreadable, lips curled slightly as if daring me to react. The group let out awkward chuckles, unsure of how to process what they had just witnessed. And then Daniel, the man she had been throwing herself at, the man who thought he had won some unspoken competition, decided he wanted to add to the spectacle. Wow, he drawled, shaking his head in mock sympathy. That was embarrassing, man. You're really just gonna sit there and take it. I turned my head slowly, letting my eyes settle on him. He was enjoying this, enjoying my supposed defeat. And that's when I knew he was comfortable because he had never once considered me a threat. Not to my wife, not to him, not to anyone. That was about to change. I exhaled, rolling my shoulders back. The sting of the slap had faded, but the lesson she had tried to teach me remained. She wanted me humiliated. She wanted me small. And he thought he could mock me and walk away unscathed. He thought there would be no consequences. I almost pitied him for that. I stood up, slow and deliberate, the air in the room shifting as the energy around me grew heavier. His smirk faltered just slightly. The wife who had just slapped me, who had made a show of diminishing me, suddenly looked uncertain. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't angry. I was calm, clear, and ready to remind them both exactly who they were dealing with. The silence that followed my wife's slap was heavier than the act itself. A few scattered laughs tried to fill the void, awkward attempts from the guests to smooth over what had just happened. But no one was comfortable. They had all witnessed something they weren't sure how to react to. Something ugly. Something that felt like a line being crossed. I stood there, my cheek still tingling, but I wasn't thinking about the slap anymore. I was thinking about the man sitting across from me. Daniel, her lover. The one who had made himself comfortable at my expense. The one who had smirked through my humiliation, who had just tried to make a joke out of me. You're really just gonna sit there and take it? I watched as he leaned back into the couch, confidence dripping from him like he had already won, like I had already lost. That's where he made his mistake. I had let a lot of things slide. I had swallowed my pride too many times, endured too many small betrayals that piled up like stones on my back. But this was different. This wasn't quiet disrespect behind closed doors. This was public, deliberate, a spectacle designed to prove something about me, and I wasn't going to let it stand. I took a slow breath, keeping my movements controlled as I rolled my shoulders back. The room had grown tense. Everyone was watching now, waiting to see what I'd do next. Daniel was waiting too, but he wasn't nervous. Not yet. I could see it in his posture, the way he lounged with that smug grin, his hand resting on my wife's thigh like a trophy he had just won. I smiled. Just a little. Just enough to make him second-guess himself. Then I spoke. Why do you think she slapped me, Daniel? The question caught him off guard. I wasn't angry. I wasn't shouting. I was just asking. He scoffed, but I saw his smirk falter for half a second. Hell if I know, man. Maybe she's just tired of. I cut him off. Because she thinks she can get away with it. The words hung between us, heavy and calm, like a knife being placed on the table. His lips parted slightly, and I watched the moment realization dawned in his eyes. This wasn't going the way he expected. But you, I continued, my voice steady, you're worse. The smirk was gone now. You sat there and laughed, mocked me, thought this was funny. I tilted my head slightly. You think I'm weak? Daniel shifted. Look, man, I was just... You think you can sit in my house, put your hands on my wife, and talk down to me like I'm nothing? The way I said it made something change in the room. The audience wasn't chuckling anymore. No one was comfortable. Even my wife, who had been so confident, so sure of herself when she humiliated me, was now watching me with uncertainty. Because this was a side of me she had forgotten existed. I took a step forward. Not aggressive. Not rushed. Just deliberate. Daniel flinched. That was all I needed to see. I smiled. Stand up, I said. His brows furrowed. What? Stand up. The casual way I said it made it worse. It wasn't a challenge. It wasn't a threat. It was an expectation. And he knew it. The room was dead silent now. Someone shuffled in their seat. Another cleared their throat. But no one said a word. Daniel looked around as if searching for an out, but there wasn't one. He had been so bold just a minute ago, so eager to play the role of the man in control. And now he was second-guessing everything. He hesitated, then scoffed, forcing out a laugh. Come on, man, we're at a party. This isn't. I stepped even closer, until I was right in front of him. He had no choice but to look up at me now. His throat bobbed as he swallowed. Stand up, I repeated, voice low, steady. I could see the calculation behind his eyes. If he stood, he was accepting whatever was about to happen. If he didn't, he was confirming to everyone in this room, including my wife, that he was all talk. Trapped. He knew it. I knew it. And so did she. For the first time that night, my wife looked genuinely nervous. Her fingers tensed against her wine glass, and I could see the wheels turning in her head. She had wanted this moment, humiliating me, making a show of her new man. But she hadn't planned for what would happen if I decided I wasn't going to be her punching bag anymore. Daniel let out a shaky breath and slowly, reluctantly, stood. Good. I let the silence stretch, let the weight of the moment settle into his bones. Then I leaned in, just enough for only him to hear. Now say it again. His brows furrowed. What? Say what you just said. I kept my tone calm, my expression neutral. You said it was embarrassing that I took the slap. Say it again. His jaw tensed. I didn't blink. Go on, I said. Since you were so comfortable running your mouth a minute ago. He licked his lips, forcing another weak laugh, but the confidence was gone. My voice dropped lower, just for him. Or are you the embarrassing one now? That was when he realized he wasn't in control anymore. I was. His shoulders tensed, his fingers flexing slightly at his sides. I could tell he was considering it, whether to push back, to throw a punch, to try and salvage his ego in front of the woman he had stolen. But I already knew what would happen if he tried. So did he. The sweat at his hairline told me as much. And so, after a long, painful moment, he did nothing. He didn't swing. He didn't speak. He just stood there, silent, beaten without a single strike. I let that moment linger before I finally leaned back, giving him space to breathe. That's what I thought, I murmured. Then, with a slow exhale, I turned away. I walked past my wife, past her stunned friends, past the suffocating silence that filled the room. And then I left. Not because I had to, not because I was defeated, but because I had already won. The real question now was, would she realize what she had lost? Would she understand, in the cold emptiness of that room, that she had just gambled away the one thing she never thought she could lose? Me. The night air hit me like a shock of ice as I stepped outside, the muted sound of the party still buzzing behind me. I didn't rush. I didn't need to. I knew that behind those walls, my absence had left a vacuum. One that my wife, her lover, and every single person in that room was struggling to fill. They had expected me to take the slap and shrink. They had expected me to slink away, humiliated and small. Instead, I had left them in silence, my departure heavier than any counterattack I could have delivered in that moment. But I wasn't finished. Not yet. I drove home slowly, my grip firm on the steering wheel. My pulse had settled, but my mind hadn't. The moment replayed over and over. The way her hand had cracked across my face. The way the room had waited for me to break. The way Daniel had stood there, his bravado dissolving the second I stepped up to him. Coward. He had thought he was untouchable. Thought he had replaced me. Thought he had won. I almost pitied him. Almost. When I pulled into the driveway, I sat in the car for a long moment, staring at the house I had built. Our house. A home that had once meant something. Now it felt like nothing more than a shell. A place I had spent too long keeping together while she pulled at its foundation. Not anymore. I climbed out, pushed open the front door, and stepped into the quiet. The house was still cold. I could feel the weight of what I had been ignoring for too long pressing in on me. But not for much longer. I didn't pack a bag. Not yet. I wasn't leaving. She was. I didn't have to wait long. Less than an hour after I got home, I heard the tires screech into the driveway, the hurried clack of heels on pavement, the rustling of keys, fumbling at the door. Then it swung open. There she was. My wife. Her face was flushed, a mixture of anger and something else. Something she wouldn't name yet. Not regret. Not yet. But close. You really just left? She asked, stepping inside, her voice sharper than she probably intended. You're really going to act like a child over this? I didn't respond. I just looked at her. Waited. She crossed her arms, her frustration bubbling over. Jesus, you're such a drama queen. I slapped you. So what? You deserved it. I felt my jaw tighten, but I didn't let it show. Did I? She scoffed. Oh, don't act like some victim, okay? You think you're so above it all. But you. Where's Daniel? I cut in. She blinked. What? Where's your little boyfriend? My voice was even, steady. He didn't drive you home? Something flickered in her expression. Hesitation. No, he stayed, she said, shifting slightly. Why do you care? I smiled. Slowly. Because I made him look small tonight, I said. And now he's sitting there, trying to convince himself it didn't happen. Her face twisted. You're delusional. Am I? I tilted my head. Tell me, did he chase after you? Did he fight for you? Or did he just sit there, licking his wounds while you ran back to me? She opened her mouth, closed it. I could see it now, the doubt settling in her bones. For all her bravado, all her defiance, she had expected Daniel to rise to the occasion. And he hadn't. She had left a king to chase a court jester. And the moment things got uncomfortable, the moment I had proven I wasn't the man they had expected me to be, Daniel had done nothing. Coward. My wife's eyes darted away, her nails digging into her arms. I let the silence stretch, let her sit in it. Then I leaned forward slightly. Do you feel powerful now? Her head snapped back to me, her lips pressing together. Because that's why you did it, isn't it? I continued. That slap wasn't about me. It was about you. About proving something to yourself, to them. You wanted to show them that you had control. She scoffed, shaking her head. Oh, give me a break. But you don't, do you? I interrupted, voice low. Because right now you're standing here. In our house. Not with him. With me. And I didn't even ask you to come. Her face paled. She knew I was right. For all her supposed certainty, she had run. Straight back to me. Because deep down, beneath all the arrogance, all the bravado, all the cheap validation, she still wanted my approval. I let the realization settle. Let her feel it sink into her skin. Then I exhaled, shaking my head. You're not my problem anymore, I said finally. Her brows furrowed. What? I stepped past her, moving towards the bedroom. Pack a bag, I said. Take whatever you need. You're leaving. She stared at me, then let out a sharp, humorless laugh. Oh, really? And where the hell am I supposed to go? I shrugged. Go to Daniel. Her face darkened. You don't get to just it. I do, I cut her off, turning back to face her. Because I finally see you for what you are. And I'm done. She stood there, motionless, her breathing uneven. And for the first time, I saw something real beneath the anger. Fear. Because she knew. This wasn't like the fights before. This wasn't a temporary argument, a wound that could be patched over with half-hearted apologies. This was final. Her game was over. And she had lost. I stepped back, gesturing toward the bedroom. Go pack your things. She didn't move. She just stood there, trembling slightly, her lip quivering like she wanted to say something. But she didn't. Because she knew there was nothing left to say. I watched her retreat to the spare room, her footsteps echoing with a finality I hadn't expected. In the silence that followed, the house itself seemed to hold its breath, a fragile calm after the storm of confrontation. I could almost taste the bitter tang of victory, not born of anger, but of an unmistakable clarity. This was the moment when the tables turned. The one who had once commanded the narrative of our marriage was now left to face the consequences of her own choices. Later that evening, as the sky bruised into dusk, I found myself alone in the living room. The air was thick with unresolved tension, yet there was a strange lightness too, a release, as if by shedding the weight of being taken for granted, I had reclaimed something precious, my own dignity. I sat there, slowly processing every moment of the night, every slight, every laugh that had now been silenced by the echo of my own resolve. I had seen Daniel earlier, slumped in a corner with his head bowed, a mirror of the humiliation he now wore like a shroud. He tried to laugh it off when I had demanded his words, but his eyes betrayed a stark realization he was nothing more than a placeholder, a poor substitute for the respect he thought he'd won by being with her. The shock of his own inaction stung him, and I knew it was only a matter of time before his bravado crumbled entirely. It wasn't just Daniel who was paying the price. My wife, who had once exuded confidence and entitlement, now sat in a silence so profound it resonated with regret. In the moments when she glanced my way, there was a flicker of something unfamiliar, a dawning understanding of the cost of her choices. I could see it in the way her shoulders slumped as she slowly packed a few items into a bag, her movements tentative as if each gesture carried the weight of a lifetime of missed chances. Later, I found her sitting alone by the window, the faint glow of streetlights outlining her in a halo of remorse. For the first time, she looked vulnerable, not the imperious woman who had humiliated me in front of everyone, but someone stripped bare by the consequences of her actions. The silence between us stretched, filled with unspoken truths and the echo of past transgressions. Do you realize what you've done? She finally whispered, the sound trembling with a mix of anger and sorrow. I studied her, my own heart a mixture of relief and regret. I realized that I've carried the burden of trying to save something that wasn't worth saving, I said quietly, each word measured. You chose this path. And now every choice has its consequence. Her eyes glistened as she looked away as if she wished she could erase the past. The truth was plain, the battle had shifted long ago, not with a violent confrontation but with the quiet, relentless erosion of what once was. Daniel's silent collapse, the stuttering halt of his mockery, my refusal to be the punching bag that he and you had assumed I would always be, it all led here. In that fragile moment, I understood that this wasn't merely about humiliation or a misplaced need for revenge. It was about reclaiming the self I'd lost, piece by piece, through years of unspoken sacrifice and overlooked dignity. And while I wasn't sure if any part of us could ever be put back together, I knew that I would never again allow myself to be diminished by anyone, least of all by those who claimed to love me. As the night deepened and the distant hum of life resumed outside, I turned away from her and the memories of our broken promises. I stepped into the cool air, each step a quiet declaration that I was moving on, no longer a silent victim, but a man who had finally taken back his power. The silence in the house was no longer suffocating. It was a release. A quiet, inevitable conclusion to a battle I hadn't even realized I was fighting until I stopped. She sat there, by the window, the dim glow of streetlights casting shadows across her face. She looked small now. Not physically, but in the way a person shrinks when they realize they've reached the edge of a cliff and there's nowhere left to go. Her bag sat beside her. She had packed, but she hadn't moved. Neither had I. For a long time, we just existed in the same space, the weight of everything we had become settling into the walls around us. "You're really doing this?" she asked finally, her voice quieter than I'd ever heard it. I exhaled slowly, running a hand through my hair. "No," I admitted. "You did this." She flinched like I had struck her. I wasn't cruel in saying it. It wasn't anger, or spite, or the need to get one last dig in. It was just the truth. She looked away, staring at the street outside like she was searching for something, an answer, a way out, a different version of the story where she wasn't the villain. But there was no escape from this. For the first time I saw it. Regret. Real. Unfiltered. Not because she had been caught or because her lover had failed to measure up, but because she had thought I would always be there. A safety net. A man who would take every insult, every betrayal, and still remain, waiting for her to change. She had mistaken my patience for weakness. And now she was realizing her mistake too late. "You don't have to do this," she tried again, her voice uneven. I let out a quiet laugh, shaking my head. "That's just it. I do. And for the first time, I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it for me." Her lips parted slightly, but no words came. She knew. There was nothing left to say. For so long, I had let her dictate the terms of our marriage. I had shouldered the weight of her happiness, endured the slow unraveling of affection, excused every slight, every withdrawal, every quiet act of disrespect. But the moment she slapped me in front of everyone, the moment she made me a spectacle for her own amusement, she had forced my hand. And now she was seeing the real consequences of that choice. She wasn't leaving because I had thrown a fit. She wasn't leaving because I was seeking revenge. She was leaving because, for the first time, I had stopped holding everything together. I had stopped carrying her. And without me to bear the weight, she was left to stand on her own unsteady legs. She swallowed hard, looking at me again. She hesitated, her breath catching. "Is there any way to fix this?" It was almost funny how small her voice was now. I studied her for a moment, considering the question. Was there? I could have lied. I could have said that if she fought for us, if she proved that she was willing to change, we might have had a chance. But I had learned something tonight. Some things aren't meant to be fixed. Some things aren't worth the effort of rebuilding. So I told her the truth. "I don't think you want to fix this," I said, my voice steady. "I think you just don't like what losing feels like." Her breath hitched. And there it was. The truth neither of us could escape. She hadn't loved me for a long time. She had loved the comfort of me. The security. The knowledge that no matter how little she gave, I would always be there. But now I wasn't. I turned, walking toward the door. When I reached it, I stopped, my hand resting on the frame. "You should go," I said, not looking back. A pause. A moment where the weight of everything we had built and destroyed hung between us. Then I heard the rustle of her bag as she stood. I didn't turn around. I listened as she walked to the door, hesitated for a split second, maybe waiting for me to change my mind, to stop her, to give her one last chance. I didn't. And then, just like that, she was gone. The house felt impossibly quiet after she left. No tension. No expectation. Just space. For the first time in years, I took a deep breath and felt free. I wasn't mourning. I wasn't celebrating. I was just existing. And for the first time, that was enough. I moved through the house, flipping off the lights one by one, letting the night settle around me. I didn't feel loss. I didn't feel regret. I just felt clarity. This was what it meant to reclaim myself. To walk away without looking back. And as I stood in the doorway of the bedroom, the room that no longer felt like a battlefield, I let out a slow breath. No more fights. No more proving my worth to someone who never deserved it in the first place. I climbed into bed, stretched out across the mattress that now belonged to me alone, and closed my eyes. Sleep came easy. For the first time in a long, long time. I had finally won. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments, and do not forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel.